Hello guys, welcome back to the last segment of the NEA guidance videos on the conclusion evaluation and how to get full marks. Let's get right into it, man. Okay, so here's the notice. Apologies for the delay. My laptop broke down before saving the video, and that was on my bad. I didn't back up the video. Yeah, I have to redo this video from scratch. So yeah, hence I'm a bit rushed right now, but yeah, we'll get this going with. And on the topic of doing things non-sustainably, like me not saving my video on a hard drive, or not even hard drive, but OneDrive I have. Yeah, shout out to today's sponsor, PoloWebsLimited.com. Thank you guys for sponsoring today's video. So PoloWebs are up and coming fashion company. They're looking to do things more sustainably, use alternative materials, and compared to other competitors on the market, I'm not going to name any because I don't want to get sued. They're a lot more sustainable, they're student run, and therefore they're a bottom up company. And now, if you do geography, you know bottom up companies are always better than top down in terms of sustainability. But not even just that, just look at these t shirts. This Visions t shirt looks crazy to me, such a unique design. I've never seen it anywhere else. And yeah, this Polo Webs logo hoodie, it's just shaking up the game. If you're looking for something, if you're looking for a New Year's resolution and your New Year's resolution is to look better, have an improved fashion sense, this is what you need. PoloWebsLimited.com. And yeah, I'll show you why in the next few slides. It will help you elevate your game and why it's so sustainable. So why should you use PoloWebs or check it out really? Well, they have a variety of stylish, beautiful and magnificent designs, but for me, it's the sustainable practices they adopt. Their cotton is all GOTS certified and 100% organic. And what does this mean? Well, it's just organic cotton is produced without using synthetic pesticides. And we don't know. We don't like pesticides around here. I don't like GMO produce. I would rather have organic strawberries than GMO strawberries. I would also rather have organic clothing than GMO clothing. So yeah. And yeah, the blends are longer lasting with synthetic fibers like polyesterization, like you learned in chemistry GCSE. It's such an important thing in today's time, using synthetic fibers to last longer. And it really helps stop fast fashion that we see today. And finally, even the ink is eco-friendly vegan and OEKO text approved, meaning they don't contain certain chemicals harmful to the environment. Yeah, man, this is just amazing. Amazing cotton, amazing ink, amazing blends. And yeah, how does this all link to geography, you may be asking? Well, it's a lot more clear if I show you this way. PoloWebs is very environmentally sustainable. If we look at the sustainability three-legged model here, PoloWebs environmentally utilizes organic cotton with 90% less water usage and no pesticides, synthetic pesticides, than traditional cotton. So less extraction, oh my bad, less extraction of water bodies like lakes and aquifers, reduced water stress and scarcity. And what does this mean? Local cotton farmers and residents have reduced local health hazards arising from pesticides leaking into local water sources, so they will live longer, healthier lives. So look at here, polar webs are environmentally sustainable, and that leads to a very socially sustainable practices. And as a result, people have healthier lives. Now they're already tackling two of the sustainability legs. Finally, why? How does this affect the economy, local economy? This is really good for the local economy of cotton farmers. They live more healthy lives, more healthy people that are employed lead to more taxable income and leads to more reinvestment into local services. And as a result, what does this mean? This Polo Webs is truly a sustainable practice or clothing company under this model. The geography backs it up, everything backs it up. And here's just a personal favorite of mine, the Polo Webs logo hoodie. Look, you can get it in multiple different colors, multiple sizes. Look at it, inclusivity. Inclusivity is crazy. The diversity of colors is crazy. Yeah, so check out Pillow Webs today. It's an amazing company, and oh, okay, it's $41.99, maybe a bit pricey, but I'll talk to the CEO, try to change up the prices. But yeah, go check it out today. You go back to the link, polowebslimited.com, and check it out. I'll link it in the description. Yeah, so like before with the other videos, there is no checklist for these videos as everyone writes a variable amount. So you just need to make a substantial argument, number of arguments as well, in a good enough quality. And yeah, another note is this section has a highest mark weighting. I'm pretty sure this is across all the exam boards, but for Edexcel, it definitely was. So be prepared to write a lot more, and hence this video is going to be a lot longer than the other ones, but let's move on quickly. And how to structure your conclusion evaluation. So here you can see my contents page that pulled up from my NEA. What I did was I put everything under the conclusion evaluation main title, but then I always answered my sub questions first, give a final conclusion, and then evaluated afterwards. So yeah, I would suggest doing a conclusion first and then your evaluation, so you can always evaluate your conclusion as well for maximum marks. And make sure to answer your sub questions first, as you don't want them to be left unanswered. And yeah, as these 3 questions, or how many sub questions you have, should lead nicely into the final conclusion. And for the final conclusion, which I have arrowed here, it should wrap everything up with a definitive answer, and it's to summarize everything in the NEA. Alright, so for the step 1 in your conclusion, you just need to answer your sub questions. It's actually quite simple. You just need to answer it with a PEL structure, so point, evidence, explanation, link, back to your investigation title, which that's what L means. And these paragraphs need to be direct. They don't need to be long. They can be short. And please, not wishy-washy. So don't waffle in these. Just get straight to your point. And arguments need to be clear-cut. And a big mistake I saw people doing here was when answering sub questions was questioning it straight away. I feel like this just makes it harder for you. It just gives you less evaluation points, or it's not as clear for the examiner. So make sure just answer your question, which counts as a conclusion, and then save the questioning for the evaluation, because this will just make it a lot clearer to read and help like people understand reading. People reading your NEA understand what you're actually talking about, and you can mention a little potential counter argument. These won't hurt you, but try avoiding talking about these in too much detail, because again, save the counter arguments or the questioning for your evaluation. And please, please, please link your sub questions to the main investigation title. After you've answered your sub question, think about what this means for your main investigations. I've already had reviewed a couple NEAs recently, and so many people just do not end up like linking anything. It's just annoying me, yeah. And the sub questions are just an integral part of your NEA. And yeah, you need to link how you're answering your sub question will link to the main title. You've done the NEA to answer the main title, not just the sub questions. So make sure you do that. And I will show you some examples of how to answer your sub questions in the next slides. So yeah, so just a keynote before entering the section. If I were you, if I didn't do this before, but this is probably a good tip, this will make your life a lot easier. Just look back across your whole NEA and yeah, just remember to look over your figures from before and ensure you remember which figure links to which theories. And yeah, it'll just make your life easier instead of flicking through your whole NEA. But yeah, let's move on. So this is the first example of answering a sub question. Again, if you see here, it's a point, evidence, explanation structure, PE structure. And yeah, the sub question is, how does the natural and built environment quality change from Church Street to High Street? Just have a read at it. And before we go into this, just a keynote, this is not the best of examples. After reading through this, I realized I could have answered the question first, as in literally answer first, say like yes or no, make it a lot more definitive, because right now I'm very wishy-washy at the start. But what I do end up answering the question, I go a very like stupid way. I go around, I do like 10 more lines than I should have before I answer the question. And if you read carefully, I didn't really answer the question explicitly. Yeah, that's a problem with this paragraph. So yeah, just make sure you be explicit. So this is not the best example. This is just literally taken from my NEA. And let's move on. So we're just talking about PE. And then yeah, so just make your point. Answer your sub question directly. Back it up with your evidence where my cursor is. So here, I've linked it back to my figures 3.3 and 3.4. And yeah, again, as I said to you guys before, you can mention a counter argument, but notice how I chose to be really brief about it. And that's just purely because I want to talk about it in my evaluation rather than now, just to make it more obvious what I'm evaluating to the examiner. And yeah, link back to all your theories and anything that will help answer your investigation title. So here I link to well-being, which was what I was talking about in my whole investigation. And just make sure when you're answering the sub question at the end, you just add a little line like I did at the bottom here to link it back to your investigation title. Yeah, so let's move on to the next example here. Again, at the start, I added it here. I talked about there's an overwhelming feeling of negativity. So straight away, I answered my sub question very quickly. I just said they feel badly, basically. That's what I said. And then again, backed it up with evidence from my happiness level rankings in my figure 3.14, which I've referenced here again. And yeah, again, look at it, guys. You need to link it back to your theories and stuff. So I linked how the sub question, the answer to my sub question links into my theories. So in this case, it will be the clone town theory. And yeah, and then at the end, I just talked about what this means for the wider investigation. And yeah, I just said it's just been largely unsuccessful on people. So let's just move on to the third example here. Yeah, notice guys before I go through this one. Look how short these paragraphs have been so far. You literally just have to give 3-4 lines. I mean, maybe this might be 5 or 6, but just a very tiny paragraph straight up answering the question. Don't question anything. Be definitive, and don't do any wishy-washy arguments. Just answer it how you feel like generally your data shows, and then yeah, just be definitive with your answers. So again, for this one, what services would residents like to see in the future? And yep, straight away, my first line is answering it. The main service that residents want are retail shops. Just be definitive in your answer at the start, and then I've also backed it up with some evidence from the. Sorry, I didn't back up evidence this time, but I linked it to my previous evidence. And yeah, and I linked it back to how it's just been unsuccessful and what residents really want. All right, so moving on. So key takeaways from answering your sub questions: don't waffle, get straight to the point, be brief, and follow a pill structure. So that's a point, evidence, explanation, link to anything possible like theories, figures, and most importantly, I didn't write it here. Make sure you link your answer to your sub question to how it affects the main investigation title. That's a big one. And yeah, so the next section will be the final conclusion, and I'm going to show you my full example, nothing cut out, because I just feel like this section is really important. It's probably the hardest to come by. And yeah, so let's move on. So just here's the first page I'm going to show you guys. Just pause it, take a read, take a moment to soak it all in. And yeah, I'll move on to the next one. So pause it again if you want. Here's second one, third one, and then here's your fourth one, and that's the final one. And yeah, so just keynotes before concluding, I want to show you guys. Just follow a pill structure, as I said before, and make sure you use a structure to answer the main investigation title. Yeah, just please keep on linking to the main investigation title and how it affects it, because this is a time to crunch up and clutch up. And if you've not made many links, this is the time to do it. And also, if you've not really touched upon how your main investigation title is affected, you need to mention it now. And yeah, so the main difference with the conclusion, pill paragraphs, and normal 12 and 20 marker ones is that in the NEA, you need to link stuff in much greater depth because you have a lot more evidence that you've been given or you've found yourself. So yeah, just please link a lot to everything, all your evidence. And yeah, as I said before, you need to link everything at this point, and this is the time to do it. So just think of, you need to clutch up, like, I don't know, Game 7 LeBron, or whoever your favorite athlete is. Yeah, okay, I'm waffling, let's move on. And yeah, so before concluding, another idea I want you to remember is the slippery slope argument. So it's just the argument where you just take something minor and turn it into a major catastrophe. So essentially, you just need to escalate all your problems, or just like, I don't know, if your area is bad, escalate it. What will this lead to? If your area is good, escalate that as well. What does that lead to? So yeah, just escalate your arguments. And although this might sound stupid, I will show you why on the next slide. So when reading a couple of you guys' NEAs, it was apparent that you guys were playing both sides in your conclusion, and you guys were just trying to argue both sides. And obviously, in an ideal world, this would be the smartest thing to do, because what's it called? You want to sound sophisticated. It's the right thing to play both sides because there's no definitive answer in geography. Basically, that's what I'm telling you. As you can always argue both sides. But this is the NEA, guys. Don't care. You're literally here to get your grade and move on. So I would suggest don't do that. Yeah, so just be more clear cut on your conclusions. Yeah, just be more polarizing. Say it's successful or unsuccessful, yes or no type arguments. And yeah, to avoid the playing both sides, just use the slippery slope arguments to exaggerate your answers. An example of a slippery slope argument would be if I saw an area of low environmental quality and I can link this to the Kuznets curve, meaning the area was suggested to have a lower income, which means less reinvestment, means a poor social care, leads to a cycle of decline, and therefore unsuccessful regeneration. So yeah, just escalate all the problems to make it explicitly obvious for your examiner to see how your conclusion will play out. So yeah, so here's another slide on the slippery slope argument. Yeah, so as much as I tell you to escalate it, please back up your points, because if you escalate a point but have no evidence, it's just going to be useless. So make sure you do that, guys, and try not to use this in your everyday life, as it'll make you sound a bit stupid, really. So yeah, just be warned. Use this for the NEA. Don't use it anywhere else, or try to limit your use of this. And yeah, make sure you just back up your points in order to counter the unsophisticated nature of this argument. Just back it up with your evidence from your figures, from your theories, and stuff like that, just to make sure it's really obvious that you do have a point and you're not just waffling. All right, moving on. I've just annotated my final conclusion. So yeah, before you just read my annotations, my main investigation title is "How has the regeneration of Leatherhead Town Centre impacted the well-being of people?" So yeah, that's my. Just keep that in mind when you're reading my paragraphs. And again, at the start, notice how I'm very definitive with my statement. So I've literally answered the title question, and this counts as your point in the pill structure. And again, you just have to use your evidence, refer to relevant theories, figures, and hypotheses you mentioned earlier. And yeah, obviously at the end here, my argument here is a stretch with this idea of excluding a group of people. As in, my town, the area I studied was very small. So when I talked about an exclusion of a group of people, it was just a very small sample size. But I didn't write that here because I've used a slippery slope argument. I've ignored certain figures and certain facts in order to make my conclusion seem more realistic, not realistic, but seem more worthy and trustworthy. And yeah, so make sure you back up your arguments. Even though my argument here is a stretch, I've backed it up with evidence of a theory, so it makes it more feasible. And yeah, just a lot more academic, I guess I would say. And again, here's another annotation. So I've again said shows the limit. I've said the indicator shows the limited success in well-being of Leatherhead. So yeah, that's my point again. State your point definitively, has your answer your title, and then back out with evidence and explain with a small piece of evidence linking. So it's quite simple, guys. Just gotta make sure you keep on linking. That's probably the hardest part of this. It's just making sure you use the correct figures and just looking back at it properly. And yeah, so here on this paragraph, this is a prime example of slippery slope argument. So I've talked about the aging population outlined by a figure I used earlier. So I've already given evidence. And then, yeah, I've escalated it to suggest what an aging population what would happen if there was an aging population. And with this one, you can clearly see that I backed this up with data from my, I think it was the non-participant observation here that I used earlier. And I also talked about my introduction as well. So yeah, stick to the basics of geography. And yeah, as you can see, this is a classic geography argument. You've probably seen this before. Let me talk about it. So it's the lack of attachment to the youth will only encourage outward migration, leading to aging population and lower economic growth. You see, I'm not doing anything crazy here, guys. I'm literally just sticking to the basic arguments. And yeah, I'm just backing everything up. So I've escalated things, but I've also backed it up. Yeah, and here's the final point here. Make sure to link your comparative study to flesh out your points more. So yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, so moving on, this is the final paragraph. So just wrap everything up, like every other conclusion you've done in your life. Wrap it up with a general overview. Use language like generally speaking, overall. Yeah, you just got to sum up your findings. And what this means is, again, just answer your question. And yeah, just answer your question again. And give a few pieces of evidence from before. How does your area fit into some certain models? And what does this mean? And yeah, just make sure you link to everything you've done so far. And yeah, always make sure to mention your theories and your figures in this part, so it's important. But yeah, this shouldn't be too hard, so I'm gonna move on. Yeah, so let's move on to the evaluation then. So again, this is a little disclaimer. Evaluation was by far my largest section. I wrote like 5 pages with barely any figures, as there's just so much to talk about. And if I went through my whole evaluation video, it would take like 2 videos. So instead, I'll just give you ideas on how to evaluate and using my examples. So yeah, let's move on. So before we move on, here's a common mistake I read when I saw some people's NEAs when evaluating, is that evaluation should not be limited to your methods. There is so much more to evaluate in the NEA. So anything from location chosen, sample sizes, investigation title, sub-questions, theories chosen, data analysis used, software used, should all be evaluated. So yeah, evaluation is not purely based on your methods and how you've conducted your methods, as there's a lot more to talk about really, and a lot more to gain marks on. So make sure you don't just evaluate your methods. And yeah, you gotta sort of think unconventionally when during this section. It's not hard, I would say. You just have to think a bit more than you would when something looks right. Question the hell out of it in the evaluation. So yeah, you'll see what I'm talking about later on. Yeah, I was just running out of ideas when I was doing my NEA, so I was just literally evaluating everything I could see in sight. And again, another thing I need to mention in the evaluation is the idea of positive or negative. Should your evaluation be positive or negative? So generally, my evaluation in my future examples I'll show you were mainly negative in the sense that I talked about pitfalls within my study. But again, guys, I probably mentioned this to you in the previous videos. Evaluation does not need to be all negative. You can talk about why certain aspects are valid and accurate, but try not to say your investigation was flawless at any point, as it will never be flawless. You're always going to be flawed. No one's perfect. Think about that. And I personally stuck to a 80/90% negativity throughout, as yeah, I think just being a negative person over your own work is a lot easier than saying it was good. And I'll show you my full example in the later slides. Yeah, so here's my first paragraph in my evaluation. Is the first page. I should know it's just one paragraph, but let me just scroll through. Just pause it and read it. Second one, pause it, read it, and you get the gist of it. Yeah, so as you can see, I wrote quite a lot, but yeah, don't be taken aback by it. Just think I wrote a lot more than I needed to, but I also just mentioned a lot of stuff that a lot of people I don't think would have mentioned, or it's not really mentioned in NEA. But yeah, just take a read and take some inspiration from it. And yeah. So let's talk about key themes within the evaluation you need to look at then. So one thing that helped me throughout was to think about what you would have done differently if in light of the flaws you mentioned. So suggest new methods you could have done, what methods would have been better, stuff like that. And then what could you add to an investigation to make your final answers better? Again, this is just an example of thinking about the future of your investigation. And think simple geography. Think long term versus short term, social, economic, environmental factors. And yeah, can your conclusion be justified in the long term? Or does your investigation disregard certain economic factors? Or does it focus more on economic than social factors? Yeah, just think about this throughout, as they're just very simple, easy talking points that will get you the marks. Yeah, so I'm gonna show you how to evaluate in the next following slides. So I think I have like 5 or 4 methods of evaluating, but the easiest method I would say in evaluation would be evaluation method 1, which is evaluating the methods, so your methodology. So it's a bit confusing wording, but yeah, just talk about your methods and talk about your timings, repetitions, sample sizes, and how you could change them for a more accurate investigation. And also think about within your methodology, your timings and how they exclude your like certain groups of people. So for example, a big theme for me throughout was that I did my investigation during term time in the mornings, which meant that a lot of younger school children, I couldn't interview any of them basically. And think about your location of study and how it affects data collection, and where and when you should do an investigation for future extensions. So you'll see at the end here, always think about the future, what you could have done better, stuff like that, and what would someone need to do in the future to improve your study. So that's evaluation method one. So here's another example of evaluating a method taken straight from my NEA. So I've already given you this example, but refer to this paragraph. So this is the paragraph 2 in the evaluation that I gave you. And here are some key evaluative points. So talk about bias in the methods of personal opinions in choosing locations and how like easy it is to get there. So I think for me, I chose some locations because they were just close to me. You can talk about that. You didn't want to venture out too far. So I was just being lazy, but I just, yeah, talk about that, the bias in choosing locations. And then talk about sample intervals. This is a really good one, in my opinion. So you can always talk about how your sample intervals were too large and you should have reduced them in order to make more, as you're going to miss out loads of key areas if you have large sample intervals. So as you can see here, I talked about changing my sample intervals from 100 meters to 50 meters, and I should have done it to 25 meters. And yeah, you see the difference between 100 and 50 meters is already quite large, and you probably missed a lot of stuff in between. To talk about that, and then talk about general flaws of the method. So a big one for me, or a big one for a lot of people, would be when ranking stuff from 0 to 5. We often don't give like descriptions, worded descriptions to people. We just ask them saying like 0 is bad, 5 is really good. And yeah, so it's lack of standardized metrics. That's a really good one to talk about. So yeah, these are very good ones to talk about. And let's move on to the next one. Yeah, so let's go to evaluation method 2. So another big thing I think you should do is to question how your sub questions led your investigation to a certain conclusion and how your sub questions were flawed. So if you can read here, this is another paragraph taken from the evaluation I just showed you. And just think about how your investigation title was flawed given time restraints, and think about your wording if it's too vague or broad. And this could lead to a lack of focus on a location. So in my case, if we look back, let me just look back to the slide where I showed my investigation title. 1 second. Yeah, so I talked about how the regeneration of Leatherhead Town Centre impacted the well-being of people. Yeah, as you can see here, just take a mental note of this question. People is a very general term, and when talking about stakeholders, it could literally mean business owners to women, to I don't know, men, to children. So I should have been a lot more specific with this. And yeah, here's my point evaluating it. So I said that there was a lack of focus on the area, first of all. So yeah, I should have looked at north and south of Leatherhead instead of central Leatherhead. And then I also talked about the term residence was used in two sub questions, and it was not entirely accurate. As I said before, I missed out a lot of business owners, and I ruled out the opportunity or possibility of people working within Leatherhead but not living there. So yeah, just you gotta think about this stuff, just like simple wording in your sub questions and how they lead to flaws in the investigation. And again, I always like to state ways to improve investigation for the future. So what I suggested was focusing on individual age categories, and then yeah, focusing on north and south of Leatherhead as well in order to make a more representative study. So always have this idea of what you could have done better throughout, and yeah, it would just show you general awareness to your marker to why your investigation was flawed. All right, so I'm gonna move on to evaluation method 3, which would be questioning your analysis. So here's another paragraph taken with the figure next to it. Just take a break or just pause the video and just have a read of it. So And big thing for I don't think many people mentioned was the idea of mentioning flaws within your software. And it sounds a bit stupid at first, but obviously softwares also have flaws. So for a lot of you guys, Microsoft Excel is going to be your main or was going to be your main data presentation tool. And yeah, you'll see that Microsoft Excel finds the average gradient and so ignores anomalies in data. So if you look here at this figure here, let me just zoom in real quick. So if you just see my gradient line is terrible. It does not go through sample points 4 and 5 and 6 and 8. So that's why Microsoft Excel could be flawed. You can talk about it here. It's missed out a lot of points because it's taking the average gradient. Just you got to talk about stuff like this. And yeah, I honestly don't mind you guys copying this paragraph because I've also used a bit of maths here. And if you don't do maths, this might seem a bit confusing, but I promise you, it's really not. And talk about the flaws in Microsoft Excel and finding a gradient and how it misses out loads of samples. So here we have, look, again, I mentioned it to you already, just a really inaccurate gradient. I'll talk more about it in the next slide. And yeah, you can talk about statistical methods as well. So I talked about product moment correlation coefficients. Shout out maths takers. And yeah, what can I say about it? So PMCC is just a way of testing for the strength and type of linear correlation. And you can always say that you should use this before confirming if you can use a linear model like Excel does. So this is a good way of just saying what you could have done and should have done. And I honestly don't mind if you just copy and paste this paragraph in, but just make sure you replace your figures and stuff like that. So yeah, talk about this stuff, question your analysis. Yeah, so let's move on to questioning methods number 2, so part 2. So we're going to talk about gradient methods, specifically on this slide. So yeah, let's talk about the secant and tangent gradients. So here we are. Yep. So yeah, so just to give a little overview of what tangent and secant gradients are. So secant gradient is the gradient that Microsoft Excel draws in for you automatically when you put it in. And it's the average gradient basically. And as you can see here, like my last figure, which I showed you, using the secant gradient misses out a lot of points. But the tangent gradient is a gradient where it's taken by differentiating at a point. Again, if you don't do maths and you don't understand what I'm saying, just don't deep it too much. I'm just going to tell you to copy and paste it in. But I would suggest you talk about this. Say you should have used the tangent gradient for your main gradient analysis, as it's going to be a lot more representative compared to this. And then yeah, just go talk about this idea, and let's go back. So refer to the figure above. So tangent gradient is much more representative. So the red line is the tangent gradient, and the blue dotted line is the secant gradient. And this will give you more accurate gradients over smaller samples. You can talk about that. And again, this is more maths, as I said before, but it shouldn't be too difficult. Just copy what I said in short form if you really don't understand and draw something onto your figures like I did. So yeah, and then, well, as well as doing this, questioning your data analysis gradient methods, you can then link it back to how what this would mean for your investigation. So here I said that if I use the tangent gradient method, if you see here, I believe my conclusion about the inequalities would be much more definitive and supported. And then I also linked this back to my students' t-test, and I would have suggested that the inequalities would have been much larger. So yeah, as well as questioning your analysis and gradient methods, saying they're flawed, you gotta say how this will affect your investigation. So let's move on to the final method of evaluating your theories. So please evaluate your theories. Do they only apply in special cases, or are your theories not applicable in certain areas? So think about like Rostow's model of development. Obviously, there's some countries that don't fit in there, such as the BRIC nations. They don't fit in the Rostow's modernization theory. And yeah, that could apply. That could be the same for your theories you've applied. They might not apply perfectly to your area. So also evaluate how you use the theories. Okay, as well as this, because using theories can steer investigation in a specific direction. So for example here, I've focused on the Clone Town and Kuznets theory, and as a result, because this was environmental, I missed out on a social factor. So I should have added a social theory. That's what I'm saying. By focusing on the environment, I ignored other factors which steered my direction of my investigation in a very different way. And yeah, as I said before, a good idea is to mention how your theories focus on certain aspects, which causes you to ignore other important factors. So again, I should have just looked at other factors. I was very fixated. If you've watched throughout my NEA videos, I was very fixated on environmental quality. And yeah, and then here you can see I talked about assumptions I made. So here I assumed that environmental quality, as you can see, was the most significant indicator in showing income levels and well-being, which made me focus largely on the environment. I shouldn't have done that. Essentially, say stuff like this. And a good thing to say is that you should have used other data sources like IMD to look at a more holistic overview of people's well-being. So yeah, just question your theories. Do they only apply in special cases? And have you become hyperfixated on perhaps social factors, and you should have looked at more economical factors? Just think about stuff like that. Yeah, so let's move on to the final point, small validated point. It's the idea of primary versus secondary data. So mention how most of your analysis will be on your primary data you collect yourself. And mention this. Talk about why this is flawed because you've assumed your data was completely accurate from the start. And yeah, just talk about how you should have made more effort on looking at secondary data sources. That should say secondary. And yeah, make sure you do stuff like this. And yeah, that's just a very small point. And the final considerations for your overall evaluation should be to write four small paragraphs on reliability, validity, limitations, and future extensions for your investigation. And you might be asking, why do I need to do this? Well, honestly, guys, I'm not sure if you've had this before, but I've experienced a lot of people you're marking at work are stupid and they don't see when you put stuff in. So in order to make it explicitly obvious to whoever's marking your work or marking your NEA, just write four small paragraphs at the end. It won't hurt you, they're very small, I'll show you how to do them, just to make it obvious, okay? So here's the first one, the reliability paragraph, second one on validity, third one on limitations, and future extensions. I've given you my full examples, so as you can see, they're very short here. So let me show you here. Yep, they're very short. And yeah, that's it. That's the wrap up for the whole of the NEA series. This is the final one. And if you need any more help, go follow my Instagram section on the right to also help, or alternatively, you can hit me up on email here. And yeah, I don't know. Let's talk about the future of the channel then. So moving forward, I'm gonna switch to more maths and physics since I'm done with the NEA, and that's what most people come to me for. And if requested enough, I could do like speedruns of geography topics like tectonics closer to exam season. And yeah, and thanks for watching, guys, because this is probably a really long video. I'll put up a poll soon asking what video guys you want. And yeah, hope you've enjoyed your Christmas, and I hope you have a happy new year, and good luck for the future. I'll see you in the next one.